The envelope sat on my kitchen table like a loaded gun. White, crisp, expensive paper. The kind people use when they want you to know they've made it. I picked it up with hands that had scrubbed dishes for 20 years to put food on someone else's plate, and I read the number typed in clean, corporate font. $370,000. My son's handwriting filled the margin. Not a letter. Not an apology. Just an invoice line and a sticky note pressed against the total like a slap. Be thankful I let you contribute. I read it twice, then 3 times. Because sometimes your brain needs proof that the knife in your back is real. Mateo, my son, the kid I raised alone when his mother walked out and never looked back, had banned me from his wedding. Then he sent me the bill for his party. Let me paint you the picture of how we got here, because this didn't start with a wedding bill. It started years ago in a 1-bedroom apartment that smelled like burnt coffee and regret. I worked 3 jobs after his mom left. I painted apartments on weekends. I cooked in restaurant kitchens where the heat made your skin peel. I wore shoes with holes in them so Mateo could have the ones that didn't pinch his feet. When he scraped his knee playing ball, I was the one who cleaned it. When he failed algebra, I stayed up past midnight helping him study even though I barely passed it myself. I thought we were solid. I thought we were blood. What would you do if your own child looked you in the eye and erased everything you sacrificed? Would you beg? Would you scream? Or would you do something they'd never forget? Drop your answer in the comments, because what I did next changed everything. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. The sign started small. After Mateo met Bianca Hart, this polished woman with an Instagram smile and designer everything, his voice changed. He started saying words like aesthetic and curated. He stopped calling as much. Sunday dinners turned into can't make it texts. I told myself it was normal. Young couples need space, right? That's what I kept whispering to myself while the distance between us grew wider than the Grand Canyon. Then came the wedding announcement. They rented some downtown hall that looked like a movie set. Custom menus. Fireworks. A honeymoon that sounded like they were touring Europe as royalty. Everyone clapped for the engagement photos. I smiled in the pictures I posted because that's what fathers do. We pretend our sons are happy even when we're dying inside. When they told me I wasn't invited, it happened in my living room. Mateo sat on the couch I'd bought at a thrift store 15 years ago, and he said it like he was reading the weather. Dad, we're keeping it small. Just family and close friends. It'll be better this way. I'm your family, I said. My voice cracked. I'm your father. He looked at me with eyes I didn't recognize. Yes, but not everyone can be there. Not, we can't make room. Not, we're sorry. Just, not everyone can be there. Like I was some distant cousin they felt obligated to acknowledge but not include. I sat there holding a coffee mug that had gone cold, and I felt something inside me crack clean down the middle. You know that feeling when you realize the person you built your whole life around sees you as disposable? That feeling was crawling under my skin like fire ants. I kept my composure. I nodded. I said something about understanding even though I didn't understand a damn thing. And after he left, I sat in that same spot until the sun went down and the room turned dark. That Tuesday afternoon when the bill arrived, I opened it at the kitchen table where we used to make pancakes on Sunday mornings. The invoices were glossy, detailed, caterer, florist, DJ, venue. Everything totaled in black and white. $370,000. And that note in his handwriting, telling me to wire it by Friday. Telling me to be thankful he let me contribute. I folded the paper slowly. I didn't crumple it. I didn't tear it. I just folded it in half and set it down. Then I smiled. Not because I was happy. Not because I was broken. I smiled because right then, sitting in that quiet kitchen with the hum of the refrigerator in the background, a plan started forming in my head. A plan that would teach my son a lesson he'd never forget. A plan that would turn his dream wedding into a nightmare he'd see every time he closed his eyes. See, when someone humiliates you, you've got 3 choices: beg, explode, or redesign the map. Begging makes you small. Exploding makes you reckless. But redesigning? That makes you dangerous. That night, I chose revenge disguised as generosity. And Mateo had no idea what was coming. I wasn't always this way. There was a time when I believed love was enough. When I thought if you gave everything, your time, your money, your whole damn life, people would see it. They'd value it. They'd hold on to it like something sacred. I learned the hard way that love without boundaries is just a doormat with a heartbeat. Let me take you back. Way back before the bill and the wedding and the betrayal. Back to when Mateo was 7 years old and his mother decided motherhood wasn't for her. She left on a Wednesday. Packed 2 suitcases, kissed Mateo on the forehead, and walked out the front door like she was heading to the grocery store. She never came back. I remember Mateo standing at the window for 3 days straight, waiting. He'd ask me every morning, "When's Mom coming home?" And I'd lie through my teeth and say, "Soon, buddy. Soon." But soon never came. And eventually he stopped asking. So it became just us. Me and him against the world. I worked mornings at a diner flipping eggs. Afternoons I painted apartments for a landlord who paid under the table. Evenings I cleaned office buildings downtown. I slept maybe 4 hours a night, and those hours were broken by nightmares about bills I couldn't pay and a kid I couldn't fail. Mateo never went hungry. He never wore clothes with holes. He played Little League and I was at every single game, even the ones that started at 6 in the morning. When he wanted to learn piano, I found a teacher who'd give us a discount if I fixed her porch. When he needed braces, I picked up a 4th job delivering newspapers before dawn. I gave him everything. Not because I expected something back, but because that's what fathers do. We build floors for our kids to stand on, even if it means we're kneeling in the dirt. He was a good kid. Funny. Smart. He'd tell me jokes at dinner that didn't make sense and I'd laugh anyway. He'd bring home drawings from school, stick figures of the two of us holding hands under a crooked sun, and I'd tape them to the fridge like they were museum pieces. When he graduated high school, I cried. Not the pretty kind of crying you see in movies. The ugly, choking kind where your whole chest hurts. I was so damn proud of him. He got into college on a partial scholarship and I covered the rest by selling my truck and biking to work for 2 years. I thought we were tight. I thought we were kin. Then Bianca showed up. She was polished in a way that felt manufactured. Perfect hair. Perfect teeth. Perfect captions on every Instagram post. She smiled like someone who'd practiced in the mirror, and she talked about branding and optics, like life was a product you marketed instead of lived. At first I tried to like her. I really did. She came to dinner once and I made my best lasagna, the one Mateo used to beg for as a kid. She picked at it, said she was gluten-free, and spent most of the meal scrolling through her phone. Mateo didn't even notice. He was too busy watching her, waiting for her approval like a dog waiting for a treat. That's when his voice started changing. He'd use words like aspirational and elevated. He stopped talking about the things we used to talk about, baseball, old movies, the diner where we'd grab breakfast on Saturdays. Instead, he talked about investment portfolios and luxury brands and people I'd never met who apparently mattered more than I did. The calls got shorter. The visits got rarer. I told myself it was normal. He was building his own life. That's what kids do, right? They grow up. They move on. But there's a difference between moving on and erasing where you came from. The first red flag I ignored was the birthday. My 60th. Mateo said he'd come by for dinner. I spent the whole day cooking. His favorite pot roast, mashed potatoes, the chocolate cake I used to make when he was little. I set the table for 2. I waited. He texted at 8 p.m. Can't make it. Something came up. Sorry, Dad. No call. No explanation. Just a text that felt like a form letter. I ate alone that night. The pot roast went cold. The candles burned down to nothing. And I sat there thinking about all the birthdays I never missed for him. Every single one. Even the year I had the flu so bad I could barely stand, I still showed up with a cake and a smile. But I swallowed it. I told myself he was busy. I told myself he'd make it up to me. He never did. The second red flag was Thanksgiving. He and Bianca went to her parents' house in Connecticut, some mansion with a wine cellar and a view. I spent the day alone with a frozen turkey dinner and a football game I didn't care about. He sent a photo from their dinner table. Everyone dressed in cream and navy, glasses of wine catching the light, a centerpiece that probably cost more than my rent. The caption, "Grateful for family." I stared at that photo for an hour. Because I wasn't in it. I wasn't even a footnote. That's when I started to realize the truth. Mateo wasn't building a life. He was building an image. And I didn't fit the frame. The day he told me I wasn't invited to his wedding was the day something inside me broke. They came over on a Sunday. Mateo and Bianca. She wore white even though it wasn't her wedding day yet. Maybe practicing, maybe making a point. They sat on my couch, the one that sagged in the middle from years of use, and Mateo cleared his throat like he'd rehearsed this. "Dad, we need to talk about the wedding." I set down my coffee. My heart was already sinking, but I kept my face neutral. "Okay. What about it?" Bianca jumped in before he could answer. Her voice was sweet, but it had edges. "We've decided to keep it intimate. Just close family and friends. You understand, right?" I looked at Mateo. "What does that mean?" He wouldn't meet my eyes. "It means we're limiting the guest list. We can't have everyone there." "I'm not everyone," I said. My voice was steady, but inside I was screaming. I'm your father. I know, he said, and for a second I thought he'd backtrack. I thought he'd say it was a mistake, a misunderstanding. But then he said, it's just, Bianca's family is big and her parents are covering a lot of the costs, so they get more say in who's invited. I turned to Bianca. She was looking at her nails. Expensive nails. The kind that cost more than I used to make in a week. So you're telling me, I said slowly, that I'm not welcome at my own son's wedding. Matteo flinched. Don't make it sound like that. How should I make it sound? My voice was rising now and I hated it. I hated that I was begging. I raised you alone. I worked myself into the ground for you. I gave you everything I had, and now you're telling me I can't watch you get married? Bianca sighed like I was being difficult. It's not personal, Hector. It's about the aesthetic. The aesthetic. I swear to God, something in me snapped when she said that. But I didn't explode. I didn't yell. I just stared at her, then at Matteo, and I saw it clear as day. He wasn't going to fight for me. He was going to let her erase me because it was easier than standing up to her. Get out, I said quietly. Matteo blinked. What? Get out of my house. Dad. Now. They left. Bianca huffed and grabbed her purse. Matteo hesitated at the door, opened his mouth like he wanted to say something, then thought better of it. The door clicked shut and I was alone. I sat there for a long time. The house was too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you hear every creak, every hum, every reminder that you're by yourself. I thought about calling him back. I thought about apologizing even though I had nothing to apologize for. Because that's what I always did. I made it easy for him. I smoothed things over. I swallowed my pride so he wouldn't have to feel uncomfortable. But not this time. That night I made a decision. If Matteo wanted to treat me like I didn't matter, fine. But he was going to learn a lesson about consequences. About respect. About what happens when you bite the hand that fed you for 25 years. I didn't sleep. I paced the kitchen thinking, planning. By the time the sun came up, I knew exactly what I was going to do. 3 days later, the envelope arrived. The bill. The invoice for his dream wedding. $370,000, broken down line by line. And that smug little note. Be thankful I let you contribute. I read it and I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was perfect. He just handed me the weapon I needed. I picked up the phone and called the wedding planner. Her name was Rowan, mid-40s, sharp voice, no nonsense. She answered on the second ring. This is Rowan. Hi, Rowan. My name is Hector Rojas. I'm the father of the groom for the Hart Rojas wedding. There was a pause. I see. How can I help you? I want to pay for the wedding. Silence. I'm sorry, she said slowly, but I was under the impression you weren't attending. That's correct, I said. But I still want to pay. Every cent, caterer, florist, DJ, venue, all of it. That's generous. But why? I smiled into the phone. Because I'm his father. And I want to make sure his day is perfect. She didn't buy it. I could hear the suspicion in her voice. But she was a professional, and professionals don't turn down guaranteed money. All right, she said. I'll send over the contracts. One more thing, I said. I have some conditions. What kind of conditions? Nothing crazy. I just want a small acknowledgement during the reception. 2 minutes to speak. And I want Matteo to publicly thank the people who made his wedding possible. That's it. Simple. Rowan hesitated. That's unusual. You'll get paid either way, I said. I'm just asking for a little respect. She thought about it. Let me talk to my team. Take your time, I said. But Rowan? If he refuses, the money goes to charity. A fund for homeless seniors. I've already set it up. So he can choose, swallow his pride for 2 minutes or lose everything. There was a long pause. Then she said, I'll be in touch. I hung up and sat back in my chair. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. From excitement. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't the one being pushed around. Matteo wanted to treat me like I was nothing? Fine. But he was about to learn that nothing can become everything real fast when it stops playing nice. That night I smiled. Not because I was happy, but because I had a plan. And plans need calm. Rowan called back 2 days later. I was sitting on my porch, drinking coffee that tasted like rust and regret, when my phone buzzed. Mr. Rojas, she said, all business. I've reviewed your proposal with my team. We can accommodate your requests. I sat up straighter. All of them? Yes. The acknowledgement during the reception, the 2-minute speech, and the public statement from the groom. However, she paused. I need to be clear. If your son refuses to comply, the consequences you outlined will be legally binding. The funds will be redirected to the charity you specified, and the venue will consider the contract breached. Are you sure you want to proceed? I'm sure. Mr. Rojas, I have to ask, is this about making peace or is this about making a point? I let the question hang in the air for a moment. Maybe both. She sighed. All right. I'll draft the agreement. You'll need to wire the funds by end of week. Done. And Mr. Rojas? For what it's worth, I've been doing this for 15 years. I've seen a lot of family drama. But this is something else. Good, I said. Because he needs to remember something else. I hung up and stared at the street. A kid rode by on a bike, laughing. A dog barked somewhere down the block. Normal life, rolling on like nothing was about to explode. But I knew better. The money moved fast. I liquidated savings I'd been building for years. Money I'd planned to use for retirement, maybe a small trip somewhere I'd never been. Money that represented decades of sacrifice. I wired it in chunks. Caterer, florist, DJ, venue, photographer. Every invoice paid in full ahead of schedule. The vendors were thrilled. Rowan sent me confirmation emails with subject lines like, "Payment received, thank you." I didn't feel generous. I felt surgical. Because this wasn't charity. This was a scalpel. I added one more clause Rowan didn't expect. I told her that the final payment to the venue, the big one, the one that covered the bar, the entertainment, the late-night fireworks Mateo and Bianca had been bragging about online, would only be released if Mateo read the public acknowledgement statement. If he refused, the funds would freeze mid-event. That's risky, Rowan said. If he refuses, it'll cause chaos. I know. You'll embarrass him in front of everyone. I know. She was quiet for a beat. Then she said, "You really want him to feel this, don't you?" "I want him to choose," I said. "He can choose humility or he can choose pride. Either way, he'll learn." Rowan didn't argue. She drew up the contracts, ironclad and lawyer-approved. I signed them in blue ink at my kitchen table, the same table where Mateo used to do his homework while I made him grilled cheese. Funny how tables hold memories like ghosts. The week before the wedding, I started getting calls. Friends, neighbors, people who'd heard through the grapevine that I wasn't invited but somehow still paying. They didn't understand. "Hector, why would you do that?" my buddy Luis asked. We were sitting at the diner where I used to work, and he was shaking his head like I'd lost my mind. "He disrespected you. He cut you out. And now you're giving him everything?" "Not everything," I said. "I'm giving him a choice." Luis frowned. "A choice to do what?" "To be a man. Or to be a coward." He didn't get it. Most people wouldn't. They'd see the money and think I was soft. Think I was desperate for my son's love. Think I was pathetic. Let them think that. They'd understand soon enough. The night before the wedding, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the conversation in my head, the one where Mateo told me I wasn't good enough for his aesthetic. I kept seeing Bianca's face, cold and dismissive, like I was a smudge on her perfect picture. I thought about calling him. Just picking up the phone and saying, "Son, don't do this. Don't make me do this." But I didn't, because some lessons only land when they hurt. Instead, I laid out the tuxedo I'd rented. Black, crisp, expensive. I wasn't going to show up looking like a broken man. I was going to show up looking like someone who'd made a decision and wouldn't apologize for it. I stood in front of the mirror and adjusted the bow tie. The man staring back at me looked older than I remembered. Tired. But there was something else in his eyes. Something sharp. Resolve. The wedding was set for Saturday at 6 p.m. The venue was downtown, some glittering hall with chandeliers and marble floors. I'd seen the photos Bianca posted. It looked like a movie set. Perfect. Untouchable. I arrived early and stayed in the background. I watched the guests trickle in, designer dresses, tailored suits, everyone holding champagne like they were in a commercial. They laughed. They posed for pictures. They acted like the world was a stage and they were the stars. Mateo stood at the altar in a custom tux, grinning like a man who'd never known struggle. Bianca floated down the aisle in a dress that probably cost more than my first car. The officiant talked about love and commitment and partnership. I stood in the back, hands in my pockets, and I waited. The ceremony ended. Everyone clapped. The couple kissed. The photographer snapped 1,000 pictures. Then the reception started, and that's when the real show began. Dinner was served. Speeches were made. Bridesmaids cried. Groomsmen told jokes. Everything was perfect, scripted, flawless. Then Rowan took the microphone. She smiled at the crowd, professional and calm. "Before we continue, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge someone who made this beautiful evening possible. The room quieted. Matteo looked confused. Bianca's smile tightened. Rowan continued. This event was generously funded by the groom's father, Hector Rojas. As part of the arrangement, Matteo has agreed to publicly acknowledge the contributions of his family and express his gratitude. You could have heard a pin drop. Matteo's face went white. Bianca's went red. Guests looked at each other, confused. Rowan handed Matteo a folded piece of paper, the statement I'd written. You may read this now, she said gently. Matteo stared at the paper like it was a live grenade. His hand shook. He looked at Bianca. She shook her head almost imperceptibly. Then he looked up at the crowd and said, No. One word. That's all it took. Matteo had no idea his wedding was now mine to control. And in refusing to say a simple thank you, he just lit the fuse. The silence after that "no" was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. Rowan stood there, microphone in hand, and for the first time all night she looked uncomfortable. She glanced at me in the back of the room. I nodded once. She understood. I see, Rowan said carefully. She folded the paper and set it on the table. In that case, I need to inform everyone of the terms of the financial agreement. Matteo's face shifted from confusion to panic. What are you talking about? Rowan's voice stayed level, professional. The funding for this event was contingent on your public acknowledgement of your father's contribution. Since you've declined, the final payment to this venue, which covers bar service, entertainment, and the fireworks display, will not be released. Instead, those funds will be redirected to a charitable organization as specified in the contract. The room erupted. Guests started murmuring. Bianca's mother stood up, face twisted in shock. Matteo's best man grabbed his shoulder, whispering urgently. Bianca herself looked like she'd been slapped. You can't do that, she hissed at Rowan. This is our wedding. Rowan stayed calm. I'm simply following the legal agreement signed by all parties. Mr. Rojas funded this event with clear conditions. Those conditions weren't met. Matteo turned and scanned the room. His eyes found mine in the back. We locked gazes across a sea of designer dresses and shocked faces. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just looked at him. And I let him see exactly what I was thinking. You chose this. Dad, he said loud enough for people near him to hear. Dad, this is crazy. You can't. I can, I said, walking forward slowly. Every step felt like I was walking through history. You sent me a bill for $370,000 and told me to be thankful I could contribute. So I contributed. With conditions. Conditions you just refused. That's not fair. Fair? My voice rose and I didn't care anymore. You banned me from your wedding. You told me I didn't fit your aesthetic. You erased me like I was nothing. And then you had the nerve to send me a bill? Bianca stepped forward, her voice sharp. This is our special day. You're ruining it. No, I said, looking right at her. You ruined it when you convinced my son that his father wasn't worth a seat at the table. The wedding planner spoke up again, checking her phone. I've just received confirmation from the venue manager. Without the final payment, bar service will end in 10 minutes. The DJ and string quartet have been notified they're released from their contracts. And the fireworks company has been cancelled. A groomsman swore. Someone's glass shattered on the marble floor. Bianca's father stood up, red-faced, pointing at Rowan like this was her fault. But it wasn't her fault. It was Matteo's. And mine. And Bianca's. It was the fault of everyone who thought money could buy dignity without earning it. Matteo stood frozen, still holding that piece of paper. His hand trembled. His perfect wedding, the one he'd curated for months, the one he'd plastered all over social media, the one that was supposed to prove he'd made it, was crumbling in real time. Just read it, someone shouted from the crowd. I couldn't see who. Just say thank you and move on. But Matteo didn't. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was Bianca whispering in his ear. Maybe it was the same part of him that decided I wasn't good enough to witness him say, I do. Whatever it was, he shook his head. I won't be manipulated. Then you'll be broke, I said simply. Right on cue the music stopped. The string quartet packed their instruments in silence. The bartender started putting bottles away. Guests looked around, confused, some already pulling out their phones to check if this was some kind of prank. It wasn't. Bianca grabbed Matteo's arm. Do something, she demanded. What do you want me to do? He shot back, and for the first time I heard real fear in his voice. Read the damn paper. Apologize. Get the money back. I'm not apologizing to him. He's trying to control us. He is controlling us, she screamed. Look around. This is a disaster. And it was. Guests started leaving. Some grabbed gift envelopes off the table on their way out. No point leaving presents if there wasn't going to be a party. The photographer packed up his equipment. The caterer stood in the corner, arms crossed, clearly annoyed this was cutting into his schedule. Matteo finally looked at me again. Really looked at me. And I saw something I hadn't seen since he was a little boy: uncertainty. Fear. The realization that the safety net he'd spent his whole life taking for granted was gone. Why? He asked, voice cracking. Why would you do this? Because you needed to learn something, I said. You needed to learn that people aren't disposable. That money doesn't replace respect. That you can't build a life on image alone. This is sick, Bianca spat. You're sick. I turned to her. You convinced him to cut me out. You told him I wasn't good enough for your perfect day. So now you get to live with what perfect looks like when the foundation crumbles. Rowan stepped forward, cutting through the tension. Mr. and Mrs. Rojas, the venue manager is asking you to either resolve this or vacate the premises within the hour. This space is contracted and they have another event tomorrow. Matteo's jaw clenched. Fine. We'll leave. Wait, Bianca said, grabbing his arm. What about the honeymoon? We still have the honeymoon. Matteo pulled out his phone, scrolling frantically. Then his face went pale. The hotel? They're saying the reservation isn't confirmed. Something about payment processing. I cleared my throat. That was part of the package. Prepaid through my account. But the funds only release if all terms are met. Bianca actually screamed. A short, sharp sound of pure rage. You're a monster. I'm a father, I corrected. A father who's tired of being treated like an ATM. Matteo stood there, looking between Bianca and me, and I could see the moment he realized just how deep the hole went. This wasn't just a bad night. This was financial ruin. Social embarrassment. Everyone he knew would hear about this. It would follow him. Define him. And in that moment of realization, when Rowan took the microphone and I knew the nightmare was about to begin, I felt something unexpected. Not triumph, but sadness. Because this wasn't what I wanted. What I wanted was a son who valued me. What I got was a broken wedding and a lesson that would scar us both. The venue manager appeared, walking briskly toward Rowan. They spoke in hushed tones. Then Rowan nodded and addressed the remaining guests. The venue is closing this event effective immediately. We apologize for the inconvenience. Matteo stood frozen as his dream dissolved around him. Guests filed out, some sympathetic, most just eager to escape the awkwardness. The venue emptied like someone had pulled a fire alarm. Designer heels clicked frantically across marble. Men loosened their ties and muttered under their breath. A bridesmaid sobbed into her phone, probably calling an Uber. The perfect wedding Matteo had spent months planning was dying in real time, and I watched it happen from 10 feet away. Matteo stood in the center of the chaos like a statue. His face had gone from white to gray. His hands hung at his sides, that folded paper still clutched in one fist. Bianca paced beside him, mascara streaking down her cheeks, phone pressed to her ear as she argued with someone about refunds. This can't be happening, she kept saying. This can't be happening. But it was. The DJ wheeled his equipment past us without making eye contact. The florist's assistant gathered centerpieces, wrapping them hastily in plastic. Even the ice sculpture, some elaborate swan that probably cost $2,000, was already melting into a puddle on the gift table. I should have felt victorious. I should have felt powerful. Instead, I just felt tired. And maybe a little bit sick. Because this wasn't some stranger I was destroying. This was my son. The kid who used to fall asleep on my chest when he had nightmares. The boy who made me Father's Day cards with crayon drawings and misspelled words. The teenager who called me first when he got his driver's license, shouting into the phone, "Dad, I did it." When did that kid become this man? The one who valued appearances over people? The one who could look me in the eye and say I wasn't good enough for his wedding? What do you think breaks a relationship like this? Is it one big moment or 1,000 tiny cuts? Drop your thoughts in the comments because honestly, I'm still trying to figure it out myself. The venue manager approached Matteo with a clipboard and a tight expression. "Sir, I need you to sign this acknowledging the contract breach. You'll need to vacate within 30 minutes. Matteo just stared at him. "What happens if I don't sign?" "Then we call the police and have you removed for trespassing." Bianca let out a sound somewhere between a laugh and a scream. "This is insane. You can't treat us like this." "Ma'am, the contract was very clear. Payment wasn't received. We have another event setting up tomorrow morning. You need to leave." Matteo signed the paper with shaking hands. The manager nodded curtly and walked away, already on his phone coordinating cleanup. That's when Matteo finally turned to me. His eyes were red-rimmed but dry. "Are you happy now?" "No," I said honestly. "I'm not." "Then why?" His voice cracked. "Why would you do this? What did you gain?" "I gained your attention," I said. "For the first time in 2 years you're actually looking at me. Actually talking to me instead of sending texts that say, 'Can't make it.' So this is what, some twisted therapy session? You humiliate me in front of everyone I know because you feel neglected?" "I feel erased," I corrected him. "There's a difference. You didn't just stop calling. You stopped seeing me as human. I became an inconvenience. A checkbook. Something to hide from your new life because I didn't fit the picture." Bianca stepped between us, her voice sharp as broken glass. "You had no right. This was our day. Our moment. And you turned it into your revenge fantasy." "Your moment?" I looked at her square on. "This moment cost $370,000. Money you demanded from a man you banned from attending. You want to talk about rights? Let's talk about what gives you the right to erase the person who raised your husband." She opened her mouth, then closed it. For once, she had nothing to say. Matteo grabbed her hand. "Come on. We're leaving." They started toward the exit. Bianca's dress dragged across the floor, collecting dust. Matteo's shoulders were hunched like he was carrying something heavy. They looked nothing like the glowing couple from the Instagram posts. They looked defeated. I almost called out to him. Almost said something that would soften the blow. But I didn't. Because some lessons only stick when they hurt bad enough to remember. The last few guests trickled out. A waiter collected abandoned champagne glasses. Someone's boutonniere lay crushed on the floor. The string quartet's empty chairs sat in the corner like ghosts of the music that should have been playing. Rowan approached me, tablet in hand. "Mr. Rojas, the charity transfer has been initiated. $300,000 to the Senior Housing Stability Fund. The remaining $70,000 will be distributed to the scholarship program as specified." "Good," I said. She studied my face. "For what it's worth, I've seen a lot of weddings go wrong. Usually it's drunk uncles or caterer mistakes. This though." She shook her head. "I've never seen anything like this." "You think I'm cruel?" "I think you're hurt," she said simply. "But hurt people can do cruel things while convincing themselves it's justice." She walked away before I could respond. Maybe because there was nothing to respond with. Maybe she was right. I stood alone in the empty venue. The chandeliers still glittered overhead, unaware that the party they were meant to illuminate had died before it started. The head table sat perfectly arranged, plates, silverware, name cards, waiting for people who'd never sit down. My phone buzzed. A text from Luis. "Saw the posts online. You okay?" I stared at the message. Was I okay? I'd just blown up my son's wedding. I'd humiliated him publicly. I'd proven a point that would probably cost us whatever relationship we had left. But I'd also taught him something he needed to learn. That people aren't disposable. That you can't treat someone like garbage and then expect them to fund your fantasy. I typed back, "I will be." Outside, the night air hit me like cold water. The parking lot was nearly empty now. A few stragglers stood by their cars, probably gossiping about what they'd just witnessed. I walked to my old sedan, the one with the dent in the passenger door and the check engine light that's been on for 3 months, and I sat behind the wheel without starting it. My hands were shaking. Not from fear or adrenaline. From relief. Because I'd done it. I'd stopped being small. I'd stopped accepting crumbs from the table I built. And yeah, it cost me something. But silence costs more in the long run. Dignity costs more. Self-respect costs more. I started the car and drove home through empty streets. When I got there, the house felt bigger than usual. Emptier. I made coffee I didn't drink and sat at the kitchen table where this whole thing started. The envelope that had held the bill was still there. I picked it up and read Matteo's handwriting one more time. "Be thankful I let you contribute." I tore it in half. Then in quarters. Then I kept tearing until it was confetti on the table. Tomorrow people would be talking. Screenshots of social media posts would circulate. Everyone in Matteo's circle would know what happened. Some would blame me. Some would blame him. Some would just enjoy the drama from a distance. But tonight, in this quiet kitchen, I knew one thing for certain. In that single word, no, his dream began to collapse. And maybe that collapse was exactly what he needed. Because sometimes you have to lose everything to remember what actually matters. The first call came at 6 in the morning. I was still in bed, staring at the ceiling when my phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again. And again. By the third call I answered. Hello? Is this Hector Rojas? A woman's voice, professional but tense. Yeah. Who's this? I'm calling from Prestige Catering. We provided service for the Hart Rojas wedding last night. I'm trying to reach someone about outstanding balances. Everything was paid, I said. Check your records. Not everything, sir. There were last-minute additions to the bar service that weren't covered in the original contract. The groom signed off on them. Of course he did. That's between you and the groom. The groom isn't answering his phone. And his credit card declined. I almost laughed. Almost. Then I guess you're out of luck. I hung up. The phone rang again immediately. Different number. Then another. By 7 a.m., I'd blocked 6 calls from vendors Mateo had apparently promised payments to without actually having the money. The wedding hadn't just collapsed. It was still collapsing like a building falling in slow motion. I made coffee and checked my phone. Big mistake. Social media was on fire. Someone had recorded part of the reception disaster and posted it. The video had already been shared hundreds of times. Comments ranged from supportive to vicious. Good for the dad. Son sounds entitled. This is toxic on both sides. Imagine ruining your own kid's wedding. Imagine banning your dad then sending him a bill. The debate raged online like people were watching a reality show instead of someone's actual life. But that's what happens when private pain becomes public theater. Everyone gets an opinion. Nobody has context. My phone rang again. This time it was a number I recognized. My neighbor Carol. I answered. Hector, honey, are you okay? I saw the posts. I'm fine, Carol. Sweetheart, no you're not. What happened? I gave her the short version. She listened without interrupting, which I appreciated. When I finished, she sighed. That boy needed a reality check, she said. But Hector, this is going to get worse before it gets better. I know. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, you just declared war. She wasn't wrong. I'd fired the first shot, and Mateo wasn't going to take it quietly. Pride has a way of making people double down instead of backing off. Sure enough, by noon, Mateo had posted his own statement. I saw it because 3 different people sent me screenshots. Last night should have been the happiest day of my life. Instead, it became a public humiliation orchestrated by someone who claims to love me. Family should support you, not sabotage you. I'm heartbroken but moving forward. Thank you to everyone who reached out. No mention of the bill. No mention of banning me. No mention of why any of this happened in the first place. Just a carefully crafted victim narrative that painted me as a villain. The comments were predictably supportive of him. People who didn't know the full story rushed to defend him. So sorry this happened. Your dad sounds toxic. Cut him out of your life. I closed the app. My hands were clenched so tight my knuckles were white. Luis came by that afternoon. Didn't call first, just showed up with 2 sandwiches and a 6-pack of beer. We sat on my porch and ate in silence for a while. You see his post? Luis finally asked. Yeah. You gonna respond? No. Why not? Because I'm not fighting for public approval, I said. I'm not trying to win an argument online. I did what I did. People can think whatever they want. Luis took a long drink of beer. You know his credit's gonna be destroyed, right? All those vendors calling you? They'll come after him hard. Sue him probably. Ruin him financially. That's not my problem. You sure about that? Because he's still your son. I looked at Luis. When does that stop being my problem? When does he become responsible for his own choices? He always was responsible. But you're his dad. That doesn't just switch off. It does when he treats me like an ATM. Luis shrugged. Maybe. Or maybe you're both stubborn as hell and this whole thing could have been avoided with a conversation. I tried conversations. He stopped listening. Then you should have tried harder. I didn't respond. Partly because I was angry. Partly because he might have been right. The week that followed was brutal. Vendors sued Mateo for unpaid balances. Bianca's parents threatened legal action, claiming he'd misrepresented his financial situation. The hotel they were supposed to honeymoon at demanded full payment or they'd report him for fraud. His life was imploding and I was watching it happen from the sidelines. Friends stopped calling me. Not all of them, but enough that I noticed. People didn't know what to say. Didn't know whose side to take. Family drama makes people uncomfortable. They'd rather just avoid it entirely than risk saying the wrong thing. But Carol kept coming by. And Luis. And a handful of others who'd known me long enough to trust one wasn't a monster, even if my actions looked monstrous. 2 weeks after the wedding, I got a different kind of call. A reporter from the local paper. She'd heard about the incident and wanted to interview me. No, I said immediately. Mr. Rojas, people are talking. Don't you want to tell your side? My side isn't for sale. This isn't about money. It's about truth. The truth is complicated, I said. And newspapers don't do complicated. They do headlines and sound bites. So no. Leave me alone. I hung up. But the damage was done. The story ran anyway, cobbled together from social media posts and second-hand accounts. The headline read, "Father sabotages son's wedding over alleged snub." Like my pain was hypothetical. I stopped reading after the first paragraph. Some stories can't be told fairly in print. They're too messy, too human, too tangled in history that no journalist could understand. What they did capture accidentally was the collapse itself. The venue chaos. The canceled honeymoon. The financial fallout. And buried in the middle of the article was a line that made me pause. Sources close to the family say the funds were redirected to charity, benefiting homeless seniors and college scholarships. At least they got that part right. The string quartet stopped playing when I walked in that night, metaphorically anyway. There was no music anymore. Just silence and wreckage and the sound of a family breaking apart in real time. But here's the thing about collapse. It clears space. It forces people to confront what's real. And sometimes what's real is ugly. But at least it's honest. Mateo's perfect life, the one he'd built on image and credit and other people's money, was crumbling. And that crumbling would either destroy him or rebuild him. I couldn't control which one. All I could do was wait. And that was only the beginning of Mateo's nightmare. 3 weeks after the wedding that never was, Mateo's world had become a graveyard of consequences. I know this because people talk. Because Carol saw Bianca's mother at the grocery store and overheard her on the phone, voice tight with rage. Because Luis ran into one of Mateo's groomsmen at the gas station, and the guy looked uncomfortable when he mentioned Mateo's name. Because in a small community, secrets have a shelf life of about 48 hours. Mateo and Bianca moved out of their downtown apartment. Not because they wanted to. Because they couldn't afford it anymore. The lease they'd signed based on combined incomes and wedding gifts that never materialized was now a financial anchor dragging them under. They moved into Bianca's parents' basement. I heard that detail from Carol, who heard it from her hairdresser, who heard it from Bianca's cousin. The gossip chain was long, but the message was clear. They'd gone from champagne and chandeliers to living in someone else's basement in less than a month. The lawsuits started piling up. First the caterer, suing for unpaid additions and service fees. Then the venue, claiming breach of contract for damages and lost revenue. The hotel chain that was supposed to host their honeymoon filed a claim for fraudulent booking. Mateo's credit score, which he'd spent years building, collapsed overnight like a house made of cards. I didn't take pleasure in hearing this. That's what people don't understand. They think revenge feels good. They think watching someone suffer who hurt you brings satisfaction. It doesn't. It just makes you feel hollowed out and old. But I didn't stop it either. Because the lesson wasn't finished yet. Mateo tried to rally. He posted pictures online, strategic ones. Him and Bianca hiking. Coffee shop visits. Sunset photos with captions about finding perspective and what really matters. He was trying to sell a narrative of resilience, of bouncing back, of love conquering all. But the comments told a different story. People weren't buying it anymore. Someone would inevitably bring up the wedding. Ask pointed questions. Make jokes. The internet has a long memory and zero mercy. Bianca's friends started distancing themselves. The same women who'd posed in matching robes for pre-wedding photos suddenly had busy schedules. Plans fell through. Group chats went quiet. When your social currency is image and your image gets shattered, people cash out fast. I watched all this from a distance like observing a car crash in slow motion. Part of me wanted to reach out. Part of me wanted to tell him I'd help if he just swallowed his pride and asked. But another part, the part that remembered the bill, the note, the casual cruelty of being erased, stayed quiet. Some lessons require silence to sink in. One afternoon I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Mr. Rojas? A man's voice, older, formal. Speaking. My name is Richard Hart. I'm Bianca's father. I sat up straighter. Okay. I'd like to meet with you. Coffee maybe. Just talk. About what? About what happened. About my daughter. About your son. About how we fix this mess. I almost said no. Almost told him there was nothing to fix, nothing to discuss. But curiosity won. When? Tomorrow. 2 p.m. That diner on Main Street. I'll be there. He hung up without saying goodbye. Richard Hart showed up in a suit that probably cost more than my car. He ordered black coffee and sat across from me with the posture of a man used to boardrooms and negotiations. "Thank you for coming," he said. "What do you want?" He didn't waste time. "I want you to drop the conditions. Release the remaining funds so my daughter can salvage what's left of her marriage." I almost laughed. "You're joking." "I'm not. This has gone far enough. You made your point. Now let's be adults and end it. Your daughter convinced my son I wasn't worth a seat at his wedding. Then they sent me a bill for $370,000. That doesn't sound like adult behavior to me." Richard's jaw tightened. "Bianca made a mistake. She's young. She got caught up in appearances. But she's suffering now. They both are." "Good," I said simply. His expression hardened. "You're bitter?" "I'm honest. There's a difference. You're also destroying two young people's lives over your hurt feelings." "I'm teaching them accountability," I corrected. "Something they should have learned before they racked up debt they couldn't pay and made promises they couldn't keep." Richard leaned forward. "Name your price. What would it take for you to release the funds?" "There is no price. The money's gone. It went to charity. To people who actually need it." "Surely you kept some of it." "I kept nothing. Every penny went where I said it would. Senior housing. Scholarships. People who understand the value of help because they've lived without it." Richard stared at me like I was speaking another language. "You're telling me you spent $370,000 just to prove a point?" "I spent it to prove people matter more than parties. That dignity matters more than image. That you can't erase someone and then expect them to bankroll your fantasy." He sat back, shaking his head. "You're insane." "Maybe. Or maybe I'm the only sane one in this whole mess." Richard left without finishing his coffee. He dropped a 20 on the table, more than enough to cover both drinks, and walked out with the stiff posture of a man who wasn't used to not getting his way. I sat there alone, staring at the 20. Money always talks. People with money think it's a universal language, a solution to every problem. They never understand that some things can't be bought. Like respect. Like acknowledgement. Like the simple act of treating people like they matter. That night I got a text from an unknown number. Just 3 words, "We'll be fine." I knew it was Mateo. Even though he was using a different phone or blocking his number. I knew his defiance. His stubborn pride that refused to bend even when it was breaking him. I stared at those 3 words for a long time. "We'll be fine." The same phrase people use to convince themselves more than anyone else. The same phrase that pretends struggle is temporary, that consequences are optional, that reality can be negotiated if you just stay positive enough. I didn't respond. What was there to say? That they wouldn't be fine? That pride doesn't pay rent? That the world doesn't care about hashtags and sunset photos when creditors come calling? He'd learn. Or he wouldn't. Either way, I'd done what I set out to do. The cracks in his marriage, his friendships, and his pride were now wide open. And whether he used those cracks to rebuild something honest or just covered them up with more illusions was his choice to make. I turned off my phone and went to bed. Tomorrow would bring more calls, more gossip, more fallout. But tonight, I'd sleep knowing I'd stopped being invisible. I'd stopped being small. And sometimes that's enough. 4 months passed like a slow bleed. Mateo's life didn't magically fix itself. The lawsuits moved forward. Settlements were negotiated. His credit was destroyed. Bianca's parents hired lawyers, and suddenly the young couple who'd wanted a fairy tale wedding found themselves sitting in mediators' offices arguing about payment plans. I heard through Carol, who heard through someone else, that Mateo had taken a second job. Nights at a warehouse loading trucks. The same kind of work I'd done when he was young. The kind of work that makes your back ache and your hands crack and your pride disappear because you're too tired to hold on to it. Poetic justice, some would call it. I called it education. Bianca, from what I gathered, wasn't handling the fall from grace well. There were rumors of fights. Slammed doors. Her parents pressuring them to annul the marriage and cut their losses. The Instagram post stopped. The carefully curated life vanished like it never existed. Because that's the thing about houses built on image. When the frame breaks, there's nothing underneath to hold them up. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. I just lived my life. I went to work. I had coffee with Louise. I helped Carol fix her fence. I existed in the quiet spaces where real people live real lives without hashtags or filters. Then one Thursday evening in October, there was a knock on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened it and there stood Mateo. He looked different. Thinner. Tired. His clothes were clean but worn. His hair needed cutting. There were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before, the kind that come from stress and sleepless nights and confronting realities you've spent your whole life avoiding. We stared at each other for a long moment. I didn't invite him in. Didn't smile. Didn't make it easy. "Can we talk?" he finally asked. His voice was hoarse. "About what?" "About everything." I stepped aside. He walked in slowly like he was entering a museum or a church, someplace that demanded respect. He sat on the same couch where he told me I wasn't invited to his wedding. I sat across from him in the chair I'd occupied that night. The silence stretched between us like a bridge neither of us wanted to cross first. "I don't know where to start," he said eventually. "Start with why you're here." He rubbed his face with both hands. "I'm here because I'm drowning. Because everything fell apart. Because I need help and I don't have anyone else to ask." "What about Bianca's parents?" He laughed bitterly. "They want us to get the marriage annulled. Say I misrepresented my financial situation. Say I'm dragging their daughter down. They've offered to pay my debts if I walk away from her. Are you going to?" "I don't know." His voice cracked. "I don't know anything anymore." I let him sit with that. Let the silence do the work words couldn't. "Why did you do it, Dad?" he asked quietly. "Why did you destroy my wedding?" "I didn't destroy it," I said. "I gave you a choice. You chose pride over humility. You chose image over family. The destruction was your decision, not mine. You set me up. I set up a test. You failed it." His jaw clenched. "That's not fair." "Fair?" The word came out sharper than I intended. "You sent me a bill for $370,000 after banning me from your wedding and told me to be thankful I could contribute. And you want to talk about fair? Do you think Mateo deserves a second chance, or has he burned that bridge for good? Let me know in the comments what you would do if you were in my shoes." Mateo looked down at his hands. They were rougher than I remembered. Working hands now. "I was wrong," he said softly. "About all of it. About you. About what matters. About everything. Words are easy. I know. That's why I'm here. Not just to say sorry, but to ask what I can do to make this right." I studied him. Looked for signs of manipulation, of strategy, of the same performative apology I'd seen him give others when he wanted something. But all I saw was exhaustion and something that looked like genuine regret. "You can't make it right," I said. "Not completely. Some things break in ways that don't fix. So that's it? We're done?" "I didn't say that. I said it doesn't fix. But it can heal. Slowly. If you're willing to do the work." "What kind of work?" "The kind that doesn't come with a shortcut. The kind that means showing up. Being honest. Not just when it's convenient, but when it's hard. Not just when you need something, but when you have nothing to offer but your presence." He nodded slowly. "I can do that." "Can you?" "Because this isn't a one-time thing. This is changing how you live. How you treat people. How you value things. Are you ready for that?" "I don't have a choice," he said. "I lost everything else. The apartment. The image. The friends who only liked me when I was winning. The only thing I have left is the chance to rebuild. And I can't do it without you." Those last words hung in the air. Heavy. Real. I'd wanted acknowledgement. I'd wanted him to see me. To value me. And here he was, stripped of everything that had made him feel important. Finally asking for what I'd been offering all along. But acknowledgement born from desperation isn't the same as acknowledgement born from love. And I needed to know which one this was. "Here's what's going to happen," I said. "You're going to leave now. You're going to go home and think about whether you're here because you've learned something or because you're out of options. And if you come back, if you really mean this, you're going to prove it with actions, not words." "How?" "By showing up. Every week. Not for money. Not for help with your debt. Just to sit here and talk. To rebuild what we lost. To earn back the trust you threw away. And if you can do that for 6 months without asking me for anything, then we'll talk about what comes next." He looked like I'd slapped him. 6 months? That's nothing compared to the 25 years I invested in you. So yeah, 6 months. Take it or leave it. He stood slowly. "I'll take it. We'll see." I walked him to the door. He paused on the threshold, turned back like he wanted to say something else. But he didn't. He just nodded and walked to his car, an old Honda that had seen better days. I watched him drive away and felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But maybe the possibility of it. Like a seed that hasn't sprouted but exists in the soil, waiting. The cracks in his life were wide open now. And whether he used them to let light in or just watched them grow wider was entirely up to him. Mateo came back the next Thursday. And the Thursday after that. And the one after that. At first, the conversations were stiff. Awkward silences filled with the weight of everything unsaid. We talk about safe things, the weather, his job, how the neighborhood was changing. Surface-level stuff that kept us from diving into the mess underneath. But slowly, over weeks that became months, something shifted. He started telling me about the warehouse job. How his back hurt. How his coworkers were mostly immigrants working 2 jobs to send money home. How he'd never understood what I'd sacrificed until he was standing in a loading dock at 2 a.m., hands numb from cold, realizing this was my life for decades while he slept in a warm bed and dreamed about baseball. "I get it now," he said one night. "Why you were so angry. Why the bill felt like such a betrayal. I was asking you to pay for a fantasy while I erased the reality of what you gave me." I didn't respond right away. Just let the words settle. "It wasn't just about money," I finally said. "It was about being seen. About matching. You made me feel like I was an embarrassment you had to hide." "I know. And I'm sorry. Not because I need something. But because it's true." That was the first real apology. Not performative. Not strategic. Just honest. The scholarship fund I'd created, part of where the wedding money went, put 2 kids through community college that year. Their thank you letters arrived in the mail, handwritten and genuine. I showed them to Matteo during one of his visits. He read them carefully. "You did more good with that money than I ever would have." "That's not the point." "What is the point?" "The point is that wealth without wisdom is just noise. You wanted fireworks and champagne. These kids wanted a chance. One of those things changes lives. The other just creates Instagram posts." He folded the letters carefully and handed them back. "I've been thinking about going back to school. Finish my degree. Maybe study something that actually helps people instead of just looking impressive on paper." "That's a good start." "It's more than a start. It's the only path forward I can see that doesn't make me hate myself." Bianca left him in December. I heard about it the same way I heard everything else, through the gossip chain that runs through small communities like electricity through wires. She'd moved back to Connecticut with her parents. The annulment papers were filed. Matteo signed them without contest. When he told me about it during one of our Thursday talks, he didn't seem devastated. He seemed relieved. "I think we were both trying to be people we weren't," he said. "She wanted the life her parents had. I wanted to prove I'd made it. Neither of us wanted each other. Not really. We wanted the idea of each other." "Most people learn that after the wedding," I said. "Most people don't have their wedding implode in real time." He smiled when he said it. A small, sad smile. But still a smile. Like he was learning to find humor in the rubble. By spring, something had changed in him. He looked healthier. The lines around his eyes were still there, but they seemed different now, earned instead of stressed. He'd picked up shifts doing construction on weekends. His hands were calloused. His shoulders were broader. He looked like someone who worked for a living instead of someone who worked for appearances. One Thursday he showed up with 2 cups of coffee and a bag from the bakery downtown. "What's this?" I asked. "I got my first paycheck from the new job. Construction foreman. Pays better." Thought we could celebrate. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd opened that envelope almost a year ago, and we ate donuts like we used to when he was a kid. Simple. Quiet. Real. "I've been thinking," Matteo said, brushing crumbs off his hands. "About what you said. About earning back trust with actions, not words." "Yeah. I want to volunteer. At the senior center where your charity money went. Help out. Give back. Not because it'll fix what I did, but because it's the right thing to do." I looked at him. Really looked at him. And for the first time in years I saw my son. Not the image he'd been trying to project. Not the person Bianca wanted him to be. Just Matteo. Flawed. Humbled. Learning. "I think that's a good idea," I said. Yeah. He smiled. A real one this time. The kind that reached his eyes. "We've mended some of the tattered cloth between us. Not all of it. Some tears are too deep to fully close. But we're trying. And trying is more than we had before." He came for Thanksgiving that year. Brought a casserole he'd made himself. Not well, but with effort. We sat at my table, just the 2 of us, and we ate without pretense. No fireworks. No hashtags. Just 2 people learning how to be family again. "I'm proud of you," I said. The word surprised both of us. His eyes got wet. "For what?" "For doing the work. For showing up. For becoming someone I recognize again." He nodded, not trusting himself to speak. "So what's the moral here? Don't send your father a bill for $370,000. After banning him from your wedding. That's obvious. But the deeper lesson lives in the marrow of what happened after. First, dignity isn't given, it's claimed. For years, I let Mateo treat me like background noise in his life because I was afraid that demanding respect would push him away completely. But here's the truth, he was already gone. I was just too afraid to admit it. When I finally stood up and said, "Enough," I didn't lose my son. I lost the illusion that I still had him. Second, revenge that teaches is better than revenge that destroys. I could have refused to pay anything. Could have cut him off completely, changed my number, moved away. That would have been easier, cleaner. But it wouldn't have taught him anything except that I was bitter. Instead, I turned his request into a mirror. I made him look at what he'd become. And mirrors are harder to ignore than closed doors. Third, money reveals character, it doesn't create it. That $370,000 didn't change who Mateo was. It exposed it. It showed me that he'd learned to value appearance over substance. And when I redirected that money to people who actually needed it, it showed him what real need looks like. Not champagne fountains and fireworks, but rent payments for elderly people about to be evicted. Textbooks for kids who couldn't afford college. That money did more good in the hands of people who understood struggle than it ever would have done creating one perfect night. Fourth, forgiveness isn't weakness, but it isn't free either. When Mateo finally came back, humbled and honest, I didn't throw my arms around him and pretend nothing happened. I made him work for it. Not because I wanted to punish him, but because easy forgiveness teaches nothing. He needed to understand that relationships require maintenance, that you can't neglect someone for years and then expect them to welcome you back without question. The scholarship recipients, those 2 kids who got to go to college because Mateo's wedding fell apart, they graduated last year. One became a nurse. The other is studying to be a teacher. They send me photos. Smiling faces in caps and gowns, holding diplomas they earned with money that was supposed to buy flowers that would have died in a week. I keep those photos on my fridge, right next to one of Mateo and me from last month. We're standing in front of the senior center where he volunteers now, both of us in work clothes, both of us smiling. It's not a professional photo. Nobody styled our hair or told us how to pose. It's just real. That's what I learned through all of this. Real is better than perfect. Always. Mateo and I still have hard days. Sometimes old resentments surface. Sometimes he says something that reminds me of who he used to be, and I feel that old anger flicker. Sometimes I can tell he's biting back frustration when I push him to explain himself or hold him accountable. But we talk through it now. We don't let silence build walls anymore. Last month he told me he's seeing someone new. A woman named Sarah who works at the community college. She's a single mom, a teacher, someone who understands struggle. He asked if he could bring her by for dinner. "I want you to meet her," he said. "Not because I need your approval, but because I want you to be part of my life. Really part of it." We had dinner on a Saturday. Nothing fancy, spaghetti and salad and garlic bread. I burned slightly. Sarah was kind. Genuine. She asked me about my work, about how I raised Mateo, about my life. Real questions. Interested questions. And Mateo sat there watching us talk, and I saw something in his face I hadn't seen in years. Peace. After dinner, while Sarah was helping with dishes, Mateo pulled me aside. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For not giving up on me. Even when I gave you every reason to." "You're my son," I said simply. "That doesn't change just because things get hard. I know that now. I didn't before. But I do now." We stood there in my small kitchen, 2 men who'd hurt each other and healed each other, and we didn't need to say anything else. So here's the final truth, the one that took me a year of pain to understand. I turned his dream into a nightmare, but only so he could wake up. Because sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone you love is refuse to enable their worst instincts. Sometimes love looks like boundaries, like consequences, like standing firm even when it breaks your heart. The wedding that never happened became the catalyst for the relationship we have now. Would I do it again? Knowing what I know now. Knowing it would cost me sleep and peace and a year of isolation? Yes, without hesitation. Because the alternative was continuing to disappear. Continuing to be a checkbook and a convenience. Continuing to teach my son that people are disposable if they don't fit the aesthetic. And I couldn't do that. Not to him. Not to me. We don't need fireworks to punctuate a life. We don't need Instagram posts or designer venues or perfect moments captured in filtered light. We need the small rituals that say, "I see you. I remember. I won't erase you." We need Thursday night coffees and burnt garlic bread and honest conversations that don't have an agenda beyond connection. We need to understand that foundations matter more than facades. That substance outlasts shine. That the people who show up when you're loading trucks at 2 a.m. matter more than the people who only know you through a screen. Mateo learned that the hard way. So did I. But we learned it together. And that, more than any wedding or party or perfect day, is what family actually means. The money's gone. The wedding never happened. The marriage dissolved. But what remains? This fragile, hard-won connection between a father and son who almost lost each other, that's worth more than $370,000 could ever buy. So if you're watching this and thinking about your own relationships, about the people you've hurt or the people who've hurt you, here's what I want you to know. It's not too late. It's never too late to choose honesty over image. To choose substance over shine. To choose the hard work of rebuilding over the easy comfort of walking away. But you have to be willing to do the work. Both of you. And that work doesn't come with a timeline or a guarantee. It comes with showing up. With being honest. With admitting when you're wrong and fighting like hell to be better. Mateo and I, we're still writing our story. Still figuring out what comes next. Still learning how to be father and son without the baggage that almost destroyed us. But we're doing it together. In my small kitchen with bad coffee and good intentions. Without fireworks. Without filters. Without pretense. Just two people who decided that being real was more important than being right. And in the end, that's the only dream worth fighting for. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next powerful story of family, betrayal, and redemption. Drop a comment below telling us what you would have done in my situation. Would you have forgiven sooner or stood your ground like I did? Your story might inspire someone else who's struggling with similar pain. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to rebuild what's broken. That dignity matters. That real love sometimes looks like tough love. And remember, we don't need fireworks to prove we matter. We just need to show up, be honest, and refuse to be erased. See you in the next story. Until then, hold your people close, but hold your boundaries closer.